Hey, welcome to Imagine BL Story. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really encourages my work and helps me bring you more stories. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story.
I couldn't believe I was even doing this, standing in front of his door, debating whether freezing in the hallway was really worse than swallowing my pride. With a frustrated sigh, I rapped on the door, then jabbed the doorbell for good measure. A part of me prayed he was home. The other part hoped he wasn't. Because honestly, what kind of person shows up uninvited at their rival's door at 10 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday? Before I could turn and leave, the door swung open. James Maddox stood there shirtless. Because of course he was. Lost power again, he drawled, one eyebrow raised, the corner of his mouth hinting at a smirk. His voice was low, roughened just enough to make my spine do something deeply inconvenient. "I didn't realize you'd become the neighborhood power bank," I said, aiming for sarcasm and landing somewhere between awkward and breathless. "You could have called," he replied easily, stepping aside. "Unless you just wanted an excuse to come over." I brushed past him, pretending not to notice the heat of his skin as I did. The air between us shifted. The same electric charge that had existed for years, that stubborn spark neither of us could seem to kill, no matter how hard we tried. 5 years of professional rivalry, sniping over projects, one-upping each other in every possible way. And ever since that night at the awards gala, the tension had turned into something messy. "Careful," James murmured behind me, closer than I realized. "Floor's wet." I turned too fast and stumbled straight into him. His hand shot out, catching my waist. The touch was brief, steadying, but it sent a current right through me. "I'm not a damsel in distress," I muttered. "No," he said softly, eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You're just clumsy." I opened my mouth to retort, but the lights flickered once, twice, then gave up, plunging us into darkness. Outside, thunder cracked like it was splitting the sky in half. I flinched, instinctive, stupid, and suddenly his palm was at the back of my neck, warm and grounding. "Relax," he said. "Don't tell me what to do." The words came out smaller than I meant, laced with something that wasn't anger. He smiled. Not that smug grin he used in meetings, but something softer. It made my pulse stutter. "Then stop pretending that my touch repulses you." It didn't. If anything, his touch lit up every memory I tried to bury. That night we never talked about, where rivalry blurred into something hungrier, where I forgot who he was and just let go. Maybe he felt it. My resistance thinning, my breath catching, because the next thing I knew, his mouth was on mine. The shock of it stole the air from my lungs, but my body betrayed me instantly, moving closer, answering him. The taste of him hit me, sharp, familiar, infuriatingly good, and for one dizzy second I forgot why I'd ever hated him. When his tongue brushed mine, everything inside me turned molten. It wasn't gentle. It never was with us. It was a push and pull, a war fought in inches. I shoved him back, spinning him until his back hit the wall, kissing him harder just to prove I could. He groaned against my mouth, and I felt his smirk ghost across my lips before he tangled his fingers in my hair and reversed us again. My spine meeting the wall this time with a quiet thud. That was James Maddox for you. Always pushing back, always needing to win. We kissed like that for what felt like forever. Too rough, too desperate, too much. Hands roaming without direction, as if we were trying to unmake all the space we'd built between us. I could feel every shudder, every breath he took against my skin, and the storm outside didn't help. Each crack of thunder made everything feel more urgent, more alive. When he finally broke the kiss, both of us were gasping. "This is a bad idea," I whispered. He nodded while saying, "Probably not the worst of what we've done." Then he kissed me again, harder this time, and I stopped pretending I didn't want it. And honestly, I had no idea how it had come to this. Kissing the one man I swore I'd never touch again. But if I'm being honest, the story didn't start here. No, it started 3 weeks earlier, the day I came home to find a moving truck parked outside my building. Normally, I wouldn't have cared, except this one had a logo I knew too well. Maddox Industries. I stared from my balcony, coffee halfway to my lips, trying to decide if I was hallucinating or if the universe had finally developed a sadistic sense of humor. I remember standing there with my takeout bag in hand, watching a familiar figure climb out of the truck, tall, broad-shouldered, infuriatingly smug. James Maddox himself, my professional nemesis. The man who'd spent the last 2 years undercutting my bids, poaching my clients, and somehow still charming journalists into calling him visionary. And now, apparently, he was unloading furniture next door. I think I just stood there for a full minute, letting the universe have its laugh. Because of course it had to be him. Of all the apartments in the city, of all the available leases, it had to be James Bloody Maddox. By evening, the building's group chat was already buzzing. "He's so polite," someone wrote. "He offered to help fix the lobby Wi-Fi." Of course he did. The man could charm a snake and still get it to thank him afterward. I tried to ignore it. Truly I did. But when I got back home from work the next day and saw his door cracked open, boxes stacked in the hallway, the glow of lamplight spilling out, curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I was being neighborly. It wasn't stalking if you just happened to walk by 3 times, right? Then his voice came, smooth as whiskey and twice as dangerous. Planning an ambush, or just checking if the competition still breathes after hours. I froze mid-step. He was leaning against the door frame, sleeves rolled, smirk in place, the human embodiment of my last 3 stress migraines. "Just making sure you're not planning to turn the hallway into your new warehouse," I said, forcing nonchalance I didn't feel. "Consider it a temporary inconvenience," he replied, eyes flicking over me. "Unless, of course, my presence is making you nervous." I smiled, all teeth, no warmth. "You wish." He chuckled, low and rich, like he knew exactly what that sound did to me. "I do, actually. It was meant as a joke. Maybe, but something in the way he said it didn't feel like one." His voice had dropped just a shade lower, his gaze holding mine a fraction too long. My stomach twisted, and I hated that it did, because it wasn't the first time he'd said something like that. Half flirt, half challenge, leaving me unsure if he was mocking me or testing something neither of us dared to name. I told myself it didn't matter, that this was just another round in our ongoing war. Proximity, after all, was just another battlefield. And a battlefield it was, because for the weeks that followed after his move, it was purely an exercise in restraint. Every elevator ride turned into a test of composure. The two of us standing shoulder to shoulder in that humming metal box, silence stretched thin with unspoken tension. He'd offer that faint, infuriating smirk, and I'd pretend not to notice how his cologne lingered long after he stepped out. We ran into each other everywhere. The parking garage, the lobby, the cafe downstairs, always with the same thinly veiled civility that felt more like foreplay than politeness. Until Friday morning. I was already running late, caffeine barely touching my bloodstream, when I spotted him by the concierge desk. He was talking to the building manager, one hand tucked in his pocket, voice low and steady. Apparently, there was a leak in his kitchen ceiling. I tried to brush past unnoticed, but his gaze caught mine mid-stride. "Morning," he said, smooth as ever. "Don't you have a board meeting to attend?" I asked, not breaking step. "Already did," he replied easily. "Went better than yours last quarter, I imagine." That made me stop. I turned, arching a brow, still holding grudges about the Helix merger. "Maddox?" "Not a grudge," he said, lips curving just slightly. "More of a lingering disappointment in your taste for theatrics." I should have fired something back. I had 100 comebacks lined up, but the look on his face stopped me. He was amused. And the worst part? I realized I liked it. The sparring. The rhythm of it. The fact that, for all our supposed rivalry, he was the only person who could keep up, who could meet me word for word, stare for stare, without flinching. That realization was dangerous, because it wasn't just irritation buzzing under my skin anymore. It was something far more volatile, and I had no idea how long I could keep pretending otherwise. I guess I was meant to find out it far more quickly than I anticipated, because coming back from work on Tuesday evening was to a heavy storm that caused a blackout in the building as I was heading towards my apartment. When I reached my floor, my key card refused to work. I was locked out of my own apartment in a pitch-black hallway, phone dying, and with a raging storm outside. So with no other choice, I turned right to the next door and knocked. I didn't know, standing there in the dim glow of the emergency lights, that I was about to make the worst, or maybe the best, decision of my life. But I do know this. When James opened that door, it wasn't just the storm outside that felt dangerous. It was the one burning in his eyes. And that's how I ended up here, pressed against James Maddox's front door, his mouth on mine like a challenge he intended to win. His tongue traced the edge of my lips, deliberate and claiming, like he could rewrite every argument we'd ever had in the space of one kiss. My hands were tangled in his hair, dragging him closer, demanding more, until there was no air left between us. There had to be something fundamentally wrong with me, because this was the one man I'd sworn never to touch again. Then, suddenly the lights snapped back on, snapping us back to reality. James pulled away from me, although he was still close enough that I could feel the heat of him, smell the faint trace of cedar and aftershave under the rain. He stepped back first, slowly, like detaching himself from something gravitational. His chest rose once, twice, as though he'd just remembered how to breathe. "The power's back," he finally said in a rough voice. "Yeah," I managed, trying to sound unaffected, but the words came out softer than I wanted. A pause stretched between us. Heavy, electric, full of every unspoken thing that had lived in our silences for years. Then he said quietly, "Good night, Mike." Just that, like none of it had happened, and walked further into his apartment. I stood there for a hot minute, still catching my breath, tasting rain and regret and the faint, unmistakable trace of him before turning and heading back to my apartment. And for the second time in my life, I realized James Maddox didn't have to destroy me in a boardroom to win. One kiss was enough. I shouldn't be thinking about him. Not like that. I should be angry, cold, and composed. The same part of me keeps saying it. You have every reason to hate him. Because there's a reason. Several, actually. James Maddox wasn't just my rival. He was the reason I learned that trust and ambition don't mix. It happened 2 years ago at the Emerging Business Leaders Gala. We both just lost Best Emerging CEO to some overfunded crypto prodigy with a yacht, a trust fund, and a podcast about manifesting success. Humiliating didn't even begin to cover it. I remember standing at the open bar, watching the ice melt in my drink, too bitter to even fake a smile. Then James appeared beside me, holding a glass of whiskey, with that infuriating smirk that always looked like he knew more than he should. We started talking, mocking the winner, mocking ourselves. Two sharks in tailored tuxedos, circling each other because there was no one else left to bite. By midnight, we were laughing. By 1, we were kissing in the back of cab. By 2, we were tangled in his hotel suite, the night collapsing around us in heat and recklessness. Too much teeth, too much want, too much everything. When I woke up the next morning, he was gone. No note, no message, just a faint scent of his cologne on my skin and the delicious soreness all over my body. And that same morning, the headlines hit every business feed. James Maddox secures Orion contract in surprise early pitch. My pitch, the one scheduled for noon, the one I missed because I was still hung over in a hotel room. When I confronted him later and accused him of seducing me to bed to steal my contract, he denied it, saying he did no such thing and perhaps I came onto him first. I never believed him and decided right there that he would never get close to me again. Not personally, not professionally, not ever. It was easy at first to hate him. He made it effortless, arrogant, calculating, charming when it served him, lethal when it didn't. He was in every story they tell about men who smile while they steal your empire. But sometimes, when no one else was watching, something in him would crack. A flicker of exhaustion, a quietness that didn't belong to the man who always won. And those glimpses, those cracks were dangerous, because they made him real, and real was harder to hate. So, of course, the universe, in all its twisted humor, decided to test me again. Because the very next morning, I found myself sitting across from him in the boardroom. The same man I'd sworn off, the same one whose mouth I'd tasted 12 hours earlier, pretending that nothing had happened. His expression was composed, impassive, perfectly professional. But when our eyes met across the table, I saw the same unspoken echo of last night's mistake. "Mr. Maddox," I said evenly, sliding a stack of documents his way. "Glad to see you made it on time." He didn't look up. Traffic was brutal. You know how it is, everyone trying to get ahead. I smiled thinly. "You'd know about that." Something flickered across his face, quick, unreadable, before he leaned back in his chair, all effortless composure. "Let's just hope your proposal holds this time." Our teams shifted in their seats, sensing the tension like static in the air. Every sentence was a move. This was how we'd always communicated best, with precision, with venom disguised as charm. But then, stupidly, my gaze slipped. A faint bruise bloomed along his jawline. A hickey I had given him last night. Heat twisted low in my stomach before I could stop it. He noticed. Of course he did. His lips curved, a silent, infuriating acknowledgement. That tiny smirk was enough to pull me back into armor. By the time the meeting adjourned, my smile was sharp enough to draw blood. In the elevator afterward, my assistant, Nora, gave me a look that was far too perceptive for my comfort. "Are you okay, sir? You seem distracted." "I'm fine," I said too quickly. "Fine as in you hate him," she said, pausing. "Or fine as in you kissed him again?" I shot her a glare. "Not a word." She grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it. Just try not to set off the sprinklers with your eye contact next time." That night, I swore I wouldn't think about him. I'd make dinner, skim reports, and maybe finally sleep. But the universe, apparently, had other plans. Because when I stepped out onto my balcony, there he was, standing just across the narrow divide, phone in hand, wind tousling his hair. Our gazes met through the glass doors. Neither of us moved. For a long moment, the storm of the night before hung between us. Invisible, charged, alive. Then, finally, he gave a small nod. Not a truce. Not regret. Just a silent acknowledgement of everything we weren't saying. I didn't nod back. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, heart beating harder than it should. Because the truth was, I didn't regret it either. Not the kiss. Not even that first night years ago. I still hated him. I was sure of that. But I'm also sure of the part of me that wanted to see what would happen if I stopped pretending not to. And deep down, I knew I wouldn't have to wait long to find out. As if competing in the same industry wasn't torture enough, living next door apparently wasn't either. Fate, ever the comedian, decided to tie another knot. A joint appearance on a late-night business show. By the time the studio lights hit my face, I already regretted signing the release form. Innovators to watch. The future of tech leadership. The title alone felt like a setup. And then I saw the placard beside mine. James Maddox, CEO of Maddox Industries. Of course. He caught my eye and smirked. "Still allergic to surprises, Mike? Still addicted to theatrics, James?" I replied, my smile camera ready, my pulse not. The host, a too enthusiastic anchor with immaculate posture, dove into her script, completely oblivious to the electricity sparking across the glossy white table. Two of the most dynamic leaders in the industry, rivals, visionaries, and perhaps the future of an unexpected collaboration. I almost laughed. Collaboration? I'd sooner hand him my banking passwords. James leaned forward, his voice the perfect blend of charm and arrogance. "Well, I can't speak for Mike," he said smoothly, "but I've always believed competition brings out the best in people." He knew exactly what he was doing, baiting me, under the lights, in front of millions. And damn it, I bit. "Some people confuse competition with sabotage," I said, tone steady. "But yes, pressure does tend to reveal true character." His jaw tightened at that. "Score one for me." The host's grin sharpened. "Sounds like there's a story there." "Oh, several," James said, eyes still locked on mine. "But that's for another time." The audience laughed, sensing something there. If only they knew. Half an hour later, the segment wrapped. Applause, handshakes, fake smiles. I was halfway out of my seat when the host chirped. "Quick photo before you both escape." James's hand found the small of my back. Firm, guiding, infuriatingly familiar. The heat of his palm bled through my shirt, short-circuiting rational thought. We stood shoulder to shoulder under the camera flashes. The golden boys of tech, pretending we hadn't tried to destroy each other's companies, whatever chance we got. Closer, the photographer said. You look like you're plotting something. Because we are, I muttered. James's laugh was low, quiet. Smile, Mike. You're making us look tense. We are tense. That's half the fun. Click. Flash. And I went back to the waiting room to change. I found James later by the studio exit, looking disgustingly composed. Nice show, I said. You too, he replied without glancing up. Though you might want to work on your subtlety. Your on-camera flirting's getting obvious. I stepped closer. Neither is your modesty. That got his attention. He looked up, gaze sharp, a flicker of something softer underneath. You keep looking at me like that, he murmured, and people will think we actually like each other. Maybe we just hate each other efficiently. He tilted his head. That's what you told yourself last time. My voice came out tighter. Last time was a mistake, right? He drawled, stepping closer. Because you always kiss your mistakes like you mean it. I leaned in, just enough that he could feel my breath. Keep talking like that, and someone might think you care. His eyes flicked to my mouth. And what if I do? The air between us stretched tight, trembling like glass right before it breaks. Then we heard footsteps and voices which caused us to snap apart. Mask back on, professionalism perfectly reassembled. But even as James cleared his throat, muttered something about a meeting, and disappeared down the hall, leaving me standing there, pulse stuttering like static. I could still feel it, his voice in my ear, the echo of his breath on my skin, and the sickening realization that I didn't want it to stop. That night, the photos we took at the studio were everywhere. Tech rivals spark on-screen chemistry. Hidden feud, or something more? Of course, the internet noticed. The stills of us standing too close, the not-quite smiles, and the spark that wasn't supposed to exist. Thousands of comments, edits, shipping threads. Hashtag Maddox and Anderson trended for 6 hours. I wanted to be furious. But part of me, the reckless, traitorous part, scrolled through every caption anyway. When I finally forced myself to put the phone down, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I opened the door, James was standing in the hallway, hands shoved in his pockets like he didn't know what to do with them. The sight of him, the quiet instead of the usual sharp confidence, almost knocked the breath out of me. Hi, he said quietly. You okay? I arched a brow. Since when do we do small talk? He exhaled. Everyone saw that broadcast. Half the city thinks we're. He made a vague gesture between us. Something. And you're worried it'll ruin your image? He shook his head, eyes steady on mine. I'm worried because I can't stop thinking about you. The words hit harder than I wanted them to. No smirk, no charm, just truth, raw and unpolished. For the first time since that blackout night, I didn't have a single comeback. Especially when he looked like he was lost or trying to figure out something he didn't understand. I shouldn't be here, he said. Then don't just stand there, I murmured. He hesitated and then stepped inside. The door clicked shut, sealing out the noise of the city until there was only us, the hum of the storm outside, the faint echo of our names trending somewhere beyond it. His gaze drifted to the muted TV, where the paused interview still showed us, shoulder to shoulder, smiling like we weren't both seconds from combustion. They're eating it up, he said quietly. They always do. He gave a low, frustrated laugh. You make it sound easy. Easy. I stepped closer. You made it a sport. His jaw tightened. Because it's safer to fight you than. Then what? He didn't answer. So I closed the distance between us until there was nowhere left to go. Why are you really here, James? That stopped him. His hands tightened in his pockets, knuckles pale. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost a whisper. Because I can't keep fighting you and wanting you at the same time. The words settled between us like thunder. Inevitable, electric, impossible to take back. And before I could decide what to do with them, his hand found my arm, testing the limit of what we still were, and what we were about to become. And then I leaned in, or maybe he did, and the space between us just disappeared. His mouth found mine, rough and certain, and everything else fell away. There was no hesitation, no anger, just a surge that felt too familiar to be new and too sharp to be safe. He kissed like he argued, controlled at first, then all in one he decided to lose. My hand slid into his hair, his grip tightened at my waist, and suddenly I wasn't sure who was pulling harder. When we finally broke apart, neither of us moved. His forehead rested against mine, breath uneven, eyes half closed like he was trying to catch up to what just happened. "What are we doing?" he asked, voice low on. "Steady." I swallowed hard. Something we should have stopped pretending we didn't want. He let out a shaky exhale. That was when my phone buzzed on the counter. Once. Twice. I tore my gaze away long enough to look, still catching my breath. Urgent. Board wants both CEOs to co-lead the Phoenix merger presentation. Media already running with the power duo narrative. I groaned. "You got to be kidding me." James blinked, still trying to steady himself. "They want us to what?" "Apparently, our chemistry has a brand value now." He gave a breathless laugh, shaking his head. "So, our reward for almost crossing every line imaginable is being locked in a room together for a week." We just stared at each other then, both knowing it was the worst possible idea, and maybe the only one we both secretly wanted. "Guess we're partners now," he murmured. "God help us," I said, smiling. You'd think that after admitting whatever this thing between us was, working with James would be easier. It wasn't. We agreed to collaborate remotely, which somehow meant arguing across our balconies at 2 a.m. about whose Wi-Fi was dying first. "Maybe if you didn't stream 8 different dashboards at once," I snapped. "Maybe if you didn't insist on color-coding every line of the pitch deck," he shot back. "You love my color coding. I tolerate your color coding." That night, tolerance somehow turned into another argument, which turned into another round of "you drive me insane," which ended with me leaning over the fence and kissing him mid-sentence just to shut him up. He didn't resist. After that, working remotely took on a new definition. Some days, we were in his home office, papers scattered, laptops open. Other days, mine. Sometimes we'd fight over phrasing in a presentation, and sometimes the fight would spiral until words turned into hands, and hands turned into the kind of truce that left us breathless and unproductive for hours. And still, the work got done. Miraculously, beautifully done. Maybe it was because we challenged each other so relentlessly that the product thrived under the pressure. Maybe it was because rivalry had turned into something sharper, something that kept us both on edge in every possible way. One morning, he came over in a hoodie and sweats. His hair was a mess, and he had 2 mugs of coffee. "I was up all night running the numbers," he said. "They work. Your model holds up better than I expected." I blinked at him. "Are you complimenting me?" He shrugged, lips twitching. "Don't let it go to your head." But later that day, when he leaned over my shoulder to adjust a slide and murmured, "You're good at this," the air between us went still. I turned. "You finally admit it." He smiled. "I've always known." So I turned back to the screen, running final checks on the deck. But after a while, I asked the one thing that had haunted me for years. "You never told me about the pitch." He looked up. "What pitch?" "The one after the awards. The one I missed." Silence stretched between us. His expression shifted, something softer, almost sad. "You still think I stole it?" I hesitated. "Didn't you?" He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "No. The client called me that morning. They were canceling your presentation. Said your team's framework couldn't integrate with theirs. They'd seen ours in testing and wanted in. I didn't even know until then." My stomach dropped. "You could have told me." "I should have," he said quietly. But it didn't feel like my place to soften the blow for someone I barely knew. He paused, even if that someone had kissed me like it meant something. I stared at him. "You think it didn't?" He gave a small, regretful laugh. At the time, I told myself it was just the champagne. It would have been easy to hold on to the anger, but something in his voice made it impossible. "Well," I said, leaning back, "you still owe me an apology." He nodded, standing. "You're right. A beat. I'm sorry. I was a jerk." "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "But you're my jerk now." He huffed a laugh. Not quite the redemption arc I pictured. From there, the lines blurred completely. We spent days wrapped up in shared calls and co-drafted emails, nights tangled in each other's spaces. Sometimes, I'd wake up in his house and forget whose project this even was. Sometimes, he'd fall asleep mid-call, and I'd drape a blanket over him, half amused, half undone by the sight of him human. By launch day, the Phoenix merger was not just a success, it was a spectacle. The press called it a historic partnership, a union of rivals, a merger between fire and steel. We smiled for the cameras, shook hands for the board, and when the microphones cut, he leaned in just close enough for me to hear him say, "We did good, partner." "Don't call me partner," I whispered back. He grinned. "Then what should I call you?" "Mine," I said. And for once, he didn't argue. Weeks later, after the chaos quieted, we were back in our adjoining houses, pretending to be normal people. He'd taken over my kitchen again, claimed my stove had better ventilation. I told him to prove it by cooking. He burned the eggs. We argued over seasoning. I accused him of sabotage. He accused me of distracting him on purpose. Which fine, I absolutely was. "Face it," I said, laughing as he tried to salvage breakfast. "You're hopeless in a kitchen," says the man who sets toast on fire. "That was one time. You almost set me on fire. Maybe you deserved it." He turned then, sliding a plate in front of me. "You say that, but you still moved the salt to my side of the counter." I rolled my eyes. "Because you can't cook without me." He leaned in, voice low. "Or maybe I just don't want to." We kissed again. Slow this time, not the storm it once was. Something easier. Something earned. So here I am kissing my rival over my kitchen counter. It isn't perfect between us, and we're still figuring out how not to compete over everything. But I am damn sure we will make it right. The end.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell us your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, keep daydreaming in BL.